Tweedledee and Tweedledum have a plan today. Here's what you can look forward to on today's Nice Guys on Business.
Just being able to be authentic with another human being and being open and vulnerable with another human being, creates an atmosphere where they are much more willing and open to sharing, things with me and teaching me, through their example. And that leads to like really fun, interesting conversations, not to pat myself on the back, but I will. A lot of these authors, tell me that, on their media tour that I was their favorite interview because I kept things light and fun. They didn't know what direction we were going in. Not that I was throwing curveballs at them, but just because we were just having so much fun doing it. And sure, we did wind up talking about their book at some point in time, but we had a lot more fun and engagement along the way.
You see, Danny, there's a force in the universe that makes things happen, and all you have to do is get in touch with it. Stop thinking, let things happen, and be the ball. Or be the nice guys on business. Either one is good. Running a business is hard. Being a business leader is even harder. The Nice Guys bring in top industry pros to help your business prosper in a tough world. Get real advice from real people to get you real results today. Now it's time for the Nice Guys on Business. Here's your hosts, Doug Sandler and Strickland Bonner.
All right, let's do this. So this episode is going to be airing actually on two of our podcasts, the Nice Guys on Business and the TurnKey podcast as well, because today's guest, Mike Carlon, he is going to share a little bit about maybe his podcast journey, but more about the importance of understanding your brand and your story. Now, the beauty of interviews like today's are simple. When you interview an interviewer, the conversation can actually be kind of smooth. And today's guest, as I said, Mike Carlon, he is the host of Uncorking Your Story. It's a turnkey production, by the way. And at Mike's day gig, he helps authors and brands to uncork their story. Let's talk a little bit about this. Mike, welcome to the Nice Guys on Business and the TurnKey podcast.
Well, I am just so happy to be here. Thank you for having me on, Doug.
Yeah, because I'm doing it on two separate channels, do I need to pay you twice of what I'm paying you to be on this show?
I'd say, 2 times 0 is still 0. So
got it. So I am winning. I am winning today. Hey, I want to start just with the whole understanding of, I don't even know that, I'm 57 and thinking about it as I was growing up and I went to college, nobody talked about branding or your story or the importance of storytelling as it relates to business. When did this whole story idea come into being, or has it always been here and I've just been ignorant?
I think it's kind of always been there. Every if you think about it, every brand tells a story. Brands have characters. Think about like cereal brands or McDonald's or something like that. They all have characters that make up, sort of the brand ethos. So it's always been there. And I think there was a Harvard Business Review article. This is like me putting my silly MBA hat on. But I remember, and I can't remember the guy who did it. It was Michael Peters or something. There was something, the article was called The Brand Called You. And it was really trying to get individuals to think of themselves as brands. Mm-hmm. And, you see, some people do this better than others. If you go onto LinkedIn, people have, artwork for their personal brand and just the words they use to describe what they do. And they spend time thinking about how they're positioning themselves, on platforms, whereas I spend a lot of time helping brands position themselves. But people can do that too.
So how do you even know where to start when it comes to telling your story? When I hear, hey, Doug, tell me your story, I'm like, okay, well, I was born in 1964. And, I start to go back through the entire process and I'm like, people don't want to hear that shit. Or do they want to hear that? Do people really want to connect? Like, okay, so you're a turnkey customer. Do you really care about my backstory that got me here to help you with producing your show? Or do you want to hear just how my story fits into how I might be able to help you somewhere along the way? Or what's important to you as a customer?
I think it's probably a little bit of both. I always ask people when I start a conversation with them, where does your story begin? And I'm always, and it's an intentionally vague question. Mm-hmm. And because I want to see like where people are going to pick it up on their timeline. And most of the time on Uncorking a Story, I'm talking to authors. I talk to New York Times bestsellers and USA Today bestsellers and that kind of thing. And I'm really just curious about, kind of what drives them to do what they do. Like what's the magic or the secret sauce to having, a successful career as an author. And I think a lot of it has to do with, how they want to, view themselves or position themselves. But the funny thing is, most people immediately go back to their childhood when I ask them that question. They say, I had a teacher in fourth grade who noticed something in me and who encouraged me to pursue, writing as a hobby. And then that hobby becomes, eventually a career. So one of the things that I've learned just by doing my show, talking to all these people, is just the power of encouragement. How regardless of what we do, we need encouragement in our life, from our family, from people outside the family, from our teachers, from our mentors, to really, build up that confidence to kind of, do what I call great things, do some great things.
So then I'll throw it to you then. So Mike Carlon, where does your story begin?
Well, my story begins in 1974. No, I'm just kidding.
I get it. I just discovered you're 10 years younger than me. Damn it. Everybody in this whole freaking world is younger than I am.
Well, that's just the way it goes sometimes. But you look younger than me. So how's that sound?
I don't know about that. You're looking pretty good. Nobody can see this, by the way.
What does my story begin? No one's ever asked me that question, and I should have prepared something for it. I'd have to say I didn't really come into my own until I was in high school. Like I was just kind of, I was a decent student. We moved around a little bit when I was a kid, so that was kind of hard to establish some roots. But really, when I got to high school, I started to kind of come into my own. And I did that, not through sports or some other masculine things. I did it through theater. I wanted to perform. And what I've learned recently about myself is that I was really on a quest to just differentiate myself from my twin brother. So, I've got a fraternal twin named Jim, or Jimmy, as I call him. And, he was into certain things. I'm like, well, I have to differentiate myself. I cannot be like him. So I started to do theater. I felt, largely unseen as a kid because, my brother, love him to death. He takes up a lot of oxygen in any room that he's in. So it's kind of
sounds like we have I love my brother. He's no longer with us, but I love my brother. But same exact story. I think that I probably got into the alternative sports, skiing, ice skating, skateboarding, because my brother was such a great athlete, basketball, baseball, golf, that I just never was the guy that connected with any of those sports because he did. But anyway, I don't mean to derail you from your story. But I'm relating to what you had gone through, because my brother is same. He probably took up a lot of oxygen in his space as well.
But no, it's like I wanted to be seen. So what better way to be seen than to be on a stage in front of people, having to perform. And that led me to, a social group, that I really clicked with. And it led me to become really interested in like what makes us do the things we do. Like if I'm trying to play a character, I want to get into that person's mind. And this is when I started to get really into psychology. And I was thinking about, I was definitely going to go to college, but I didn't know what I wanted to study. And I'm like, what, psychology really is, something that I'm fascinated by. I took a course on it in high school. I saw Silence of the Lambs like 700 times. And I was just like, I was like really interested in it. So that's what I studied in college. And then when I got out, I got a job in applied psychology, not as an academic or as a therapist, but really helping marketers understand kind of what makes people tick, what makes their consumers tick. And I just like fell in love with that. It was like kind of what I was made for.
Well, let's talk about the importance of story. And I know that a lot of story connects you with the person that's potentially on the other side of either buying your products or services. As a podcaster, so talk to our turnkey audience for a second. As a podcaster, tell me the importance of really connecting yourself with your community, not through necessarily the products and services that you provide, but through the person that you are with the other person that's listening on the other side of those of that podcast on their headphones.
Yeah. So, again, I talk to mostly authors and these are big names. And I think to myself, like, who am I, right? Who am I to like be interviewing, somebody who's like Tess Gerritsen, who sold like 40 million books or something like that, And, but it works, right? So it works because I have this ability to build a connection, like an authentic connection with other human beings. Whether I have my day job hat on, which is, running focus groups for big companies, or if I'm talking an author, it's just like being able to be authentic with another human being and being open and vulnerable with another human being, creates an atmosphere where they are much more willing and open to sharing, things with me and teaching me, through their example. And that leads to like really fun, interesting conversations, not to pat myself on the back, but I will. A lot of these authors, tell me that, on their media tour, that I was their favorite interview because I kept things light and fun. They didn't know what direction we were going in. Not that I was throwing curveballs at them, but just because we were just having so much fun doing it. And sure, we did wind up talking about their book at some point in time, but we had a lot more fun and engagement along the way.
Well, what's the expression, especially for those guys that have written, 20, 40 million, selling books that have been out there in the world? It's treat normal people like rock stars and rock stars like normal people, and they'll actually really appreciate and respect what you do. I've heard a number of your interviews, and by the way, Nice Guy community and TurnKey community, head over to the show notes. You'll get a link in the notes to get to Mike's podcast. You started your podcast like in 2012, the first go around, didn't you? If I remember correctly.
The first episode was in 2012. And I used it, I originally designed it as a way of attracting more clients for my market research business. So, a lot of times, many times is I was just kind of starting out on that side of the business. I was a client, I used to hire people to do what I do for a decade. And then I said, what, I want to be the guy in the room asking the questions. So a lot of people would say, hey, look, you seem great, but I need to hear like an example of you interviewing. But the thing is, I can't give, American Express a tape of me. And that's what we used to use, VHS tapes, a tape of me interviewing people for Pepsi like that. That's a big no-no. So right. I started the podcast as a way of, giving people a way to hear my interviewing style, my interviewing skills. And it really didn't have much focus kind of back in 2012. I was just interviewing people. There was no theme to it. It was just, there were interesting conversations. There were good conversations, but there was no glue between each of these guests.
Well, what I love what you're saying, and again, this applies really a Nice Guy community. This will apply to you just as equally as it will to our TurnKey community. Think about the idea of building the plane as you are flying it. The evolution of so many people when they get into business, let alone get into podcasting, when they get into business, they want to know it all. The engineer brains want to know everything before they get started with any activity that they're going to get started in. And those that are getting into podcasting, so many times they're like, hey, if I have the title, can I just go? And I'm like, yeah, just go. Don't overthink this thing. When you start overthinking it, you will completely disassociate yourself with the idea of building this plane as you're flying it. So can you talk about maybe just for a second, whether it's the evolution of your podcast or your business, the building your plane as you're flying it mentality as it relates to your business?
Oh my gosh, that's the best way to describe it. And whether you're talking about the podcast or my moderating business, Vertigo Partners, I had no idea what I was doing at first. When I left the comfort of like one of the world's biggest packaged goods companies, Unilever, where I was doing very well, just wasn't feeling very fulfilled in that role, and they decided to relocate from Connecticut to New Jersey, and that's at that point I'm like, you know what? This is a good break for me. I'm going to go do, I'm going to follow this passion. And I was very fortunate because my former employer used to hire me a lot to consult on projects. So, but I didn't know much about, even though I helped, big companies with their own marketing and advertising, I didn't know how to do that for myself. Like I really was like making it up as I went along.
Right.
It was like the wild, wild west, and then throw in all the changes that, Zoom brings to my industry, being able to, talk to you, face to face, but over computer. You're in Baltimore now, I'm in Connecticut. I used to have to travel to multiple cities a week to do this kind of work. Now I can do a lot of it from my home office. So there was a lot of like change and innovation happening while I was getting into this business, and I had to, fake it, till I made it. And, it's actually how I started my career in interactive marketing. Back in 1996, no one knew what that was.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know what we were doing. We were building websites, and we had to ask people what they wanted in them because we didn't know. So that's actually how I got involved in the career. But ever since I was, starting my career, I've been in situations where I'm building the plane as I'm flying it, and I don't think I could live any other way.
Share the importance of doing that. I mean, again, the straight line career it may have been something that our parents, sorry, your grandparents, my parents, may have been something that our parents were able to do. You stay with a company for 40 years, show up at 9 o'clock and leave at 5 o'clock. It just doesn't happen anymore. Is it important for us to have that level of flexibility in what we're doing to travel the crooked line rather than the straight line?
100%. And, my father is turning 90 this summer. He spent his entire career at one company, American Express, 43 plus years. And I changed jobs. I hopped around jobs a lot, between 96 and 2000, I think I had 3 different employers. And, I just never felt, comfortable or just being stagnant. And I wanted to try new things. I wanted to wear different hats. And I think what you see today is employees are not sort of loyal to companies, but companies are also not very loyal to employees either.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I've been in 2 situations in my career where I was a top performer, but cuts needed to be made. I was literally sat down. Actually, it wasn't even sat down. It was over the phone. I had somebody tell me that I was just a lever he needed to pull. Like, those were his exact words.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, well, that just really depersonalized this whole entire experience. So if you have to look out for yourself, because no one else is going to look after you, really. And I hate to sound that cynical, because I am an optimistic person. I'm a nice guy as well. But it's just the truth. No one is going to look out for you the way you can look out for you. And if you got a passion and if you got like a desire to do something, just start doing it. Have your ducks in a row, have some finances saved. I'm not saying, just go quit your job and follow a passion, but you can do it. I mean, people do it every day. And if I can do it, and I consider myself kind of a smart idiot. But if I can do it, other people can do it as well.
I've many times considered myself a happy idiot, maybe not necessarily the smart idiot in the room. Take me through the evolution. So 2012, you started your podcast. You took a couple of hiatuses along the way, didn't you? Or because it wasn't like steady, consistent messaging going out.
And that was one lesson I learned, is if you want to have a successful podcast, you have to have a regular publication schedule. And I didn't, because I was doing it as a hobby. I wasn't doing it, with any real focus. But around 2016, after doing like a handful of episodes, a year from 2012 to 2015 or so, I started to publish novels. And because I have this like inner creative in me, and I had these ideas, and I felt the world needed to hear them. So I started to,
we all do.
I published my first novel in 2014, and it did reasonably well, but I needed a publicist because I needed to get, beyond what, the people I could reach in my own networks. And the publicist said to me, "Hey, look, you've got this podcast. I've listened to a few episodes. You're a really good interviewer. Why don't you interview some of our authors?" And I said, "Oh, that's interesting." So he was the one who really introduced me to some like really big name authors, like A-listers. And I got hooked on interviewing them because I was learning so much. Like, it was the greatest classroom for me to learn how to become a better writer, how to become a better author. And just listen to, it was like every week I was having a masterclass by a New York Times bestselling author. And I said, you know what, I'm just going to pivot the podcast to just focusing on authors and storytellers, because sometimes they'll get actors and comedians and filmmakers in there. But that's when things really started to change for me. And I started to pick up speed. And as the reputation of the show got out, publicists just started reaching out to me left and right saying, "Hey, we heard you do this. Would you like to interview some of our clients?" And I said, "Sure." And then, up in like starting this year, like we're in overdrive now. Like I have more interviews than I can really handle, to the point where I'm doing this summer promotion where, I'm releasing one episode a day every day in July, except for the weekends, just to get through the queue. but that's another thing I learned too. It's like, I can now be more selective with the people who I'm, having on the show.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, this is part of the evolution of you letting go of the reins and some of the responsibilities that you have and hiring a company like ours, TurnKey, in order to do it. One of the things that I'm really hoping that we are able to accomplish in the next several months is the idea of, again, building the plane as we're flying it. You've had this successful show that's been out there. And again, turnkey community, as you're listening to this as podcasters thinking, well, I don't have a product. I don't really know what my service is going to be. What am I supposed to introduce? If you just start sharing your story, what's the expression? The teacher will appear when the student is ready. It's almost like the product will appear when the creator is at its peak performance or whatever. So for me, it's like, oh my gosh, there is certainly an opportunity in here for us to start working on, all right, now what service do we want to provide? Is it going to be, look, you have these amazing connections with all of these authors. Would it be, hey, how do you fast track your book to success, get on the bestseller list? I mean, you've got, with a couple more questions you're asking these people, you probably have the opportunity to really uncover some commonality between each and every one of these authors. And I'm sure that those are all things that are in your brain right now. Is that fair, or is there something else going on?
Yeah, no, I mean, first of all, I feel like you should refer to me as Grasshopper, because you are my Kung Fu instructor. But I think it really just underscores the importance of giving yourself breathing room, right? Because there's a lot of different directions with kind of, if I think about my audience, if I think about the people who I interview, there's a lot of different ways I could take it. And I'm not ready to decide on like which, what's the way to go yet. But, I'm, and with your direction, I've got some breathing room here to really think about and consider it, just like the way I have to think about writing a novel. I usually come to each writing project with an outline, but that outline shifts and it's very fluid. It's not like handcuffs that I use, throughout the writing process. Things change, new ideas come to me, new characters form. Things that I think were going to happen in the third act, might happen sooner, or they may not happen at all, or they may happen differently. So it's the same way with kind of how I'm thinking about monetizing the show. It's like I'm really just still, started this thing in 2012. I'm really still thinking about, okay, what's the best way to kind of commercialize it? I'm probably closer than I ever was to doing something that, but I'm still learning. I'm still the grasshopper here, Doug.
Well, and I appreciate those kind words. I feel like to a certain degree with my I have the other show called Ford Mustang the Early Years podcast. I've done 100 and I think this week it was 105 episodes that have come out. And I'm beginning to realize maybe the podcast was created not because I want to monetize the podcast, but because of the social media community that I've built on Instagram is right now at 21,000 and strong. And it's all organic growth. And I keep thinking, I'm even having Instagram reach out to me to ask me to be an influencer and share some things and make money that way. Maybe monetization on some things is not through the podcast channel itself, but maybe the ancillary activities that come as a result of it, or the online courses you can build, or the coaching and consulting that you can do. It's not ever, and we all know this because Mike, you're like me, you're a normal guy. We are never going to be Tim Ferriss or Tony Robbins or Joe Rogan. We're not going to have 2 to 10 million listeners and can monetize through advertising. It's the creative stuff on the back end that we have to do. The more you keep thinking about it, the more you will fine tune, but give yourself that space. My team does all of the production on my Mustang show. I have nothing that I need to do on that other than think about, okay, all that other stuff that can help me to build out the podcast monetization tool. I don't know what it's going to be yet, and you'll still figure it out at some point for yourself as well.
But as a good, case in point, the week after next, I'm going to an event in New York called the Quirks event, which is a huge market research event, right? So this is the industry that I work in. And I was able to secure a speaking spot, not because I'm an expert market researcher, but because I have this podcast. And I actually entitled my presentation, Uncorking a Story, Lessons I've Learned About Marketing from Interviewing A-list Authors. And so I'm not there pitching my research services. I'm there talking about, the podcast and the things I've learned. But who's the audience there? The audience are people who are probably going to want to work with me because they heard me at the show.
Right.
And they're seeing my interviewing skills because I've got video clips throughout the presentation. So again, to your point, it may not be a direct monetization, from the podcast, but it certainly is because of it.
Well, as a reminder, Turnkey community, as you're listening to this, and Nice Guy community, if you're ever thinking about, okay, how do I work this into the whole monetization tool, this podcast thing? Remember, my guest seat is my gold seat. It becomes gold because some guests become clients, some guests become really avid referral sources for me, some guests become affiliates of mine, or I become affiliates of theirs. They have a product that complements, not competes with what I do. And some clients, some guests become that. I don't really know where they fit into the equation, but damn, I really like talking to them. So they just become a relationship that I have. Of the 900 interviews of the 1,300 episodes that we have done, probably 100 of them have evolved into relationships. And think about, Mike, those. What do you have? 160 some odd? You have almost 200 episodes.
By the end of the summer, it'll be just about 185.
So think about the relationships with the people, maybe not necessarily even just the specific authors, but for the publicists that have sent you those authors. Haven't you created some really golden relationships over the last 10 years of doing this podcast?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's a relationship driven business. Publicists, it's interesting. I think about like the value chain here, right? So the author gets paid by, let's say their publisher, right? They get their advance, they get, royalties. The publicist who works for the publisher gets paid by the publisher as well, or they get paid by the author if the author is getting a direct relationship, with that publicist. I help them with the marketing and getting the word out about their book. So authors getting paid, publishers getting paid. No one's paying me yet.
Right. So that's the key to unlocking that box. When you unlock that box stays open. And once you figure that out, once that thing becomes unhinged, that's when wonderful things happen there's a lot of satisfaction out of delivering a message, a great quality message to an audience that's listening. I know that it's not just about the money. That being said, I always like it so that everybody is winning in all parts of the world, that the equation that they want to win. And if monetization is part of what people want to win in, then that should not be an ignored component of yours. Because like you said, everybody's getting paid except you. So let's figure out how to get you paid in this part of the process. That's the best part about solving this puzzle for you is okay, what will that be? And we will figure that out. I know it.
Yeah. I'm confident in our ability to put our heads together and do so.
So talk about for a second, as we start to wind up the interview, talk for a moment about the stuff from a personal perspective as a guy that owns a business, runs a podcast, produces your own stuff along the way. What's some of the stuff that you still work on, to try to resolve in your own world? Some people have challenge with building systems. Some have challenges because they don't want to be in spreadsheets. That's me. Some people have problems along the way that they just don't know what they don't know. What's some of the stuff that you're still working on?
I mean, my biggest challenge is I am a bit of a control freak. So, for so long, I did everything, with the show in terms of booking guests, in terms of, recording the interview, editing the interview, putting it out on all the platforms. Like I kind of did that all. And I had to realize that I had to give something of that up, which is where you guys came into play. But that's kind of my natural personality. Like I need to have control over anything. I can't delegate much. And that's just something that I have to work on, because it's the same in my market research business as well, Vertigo Partners. It's a single member LLC. I don't have any employees. I do everything myself. And it leads to a lot of late nights, and it leads to a lot of pressure. And in situations where I can delegate, I do feel better. I feel better about the process. But it's I'm a work in progress in that regard.
I think we all are. I think we all are. Promo your podcast. How can people get a hold of it? Where should they start? You got 180 some odd episodes probably as of the airing of this. Where do you want them to start if they're going to listen?
Yeah, so if you go right to uncorkingastory.com, that'll bring you to the show. All of our episodes are archived there. Of course, you can go to Apple Podcasts as well. It's there. It's anywhere you can get podcasts. Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube is becoming a bigger channel for us. Also Instagram, I post a lot of 1-minute video clips on social media, Instagram and Facebook. Haven't figured out TikTok yet. Kind of scared.
I've never been on it. So it's like never been on Snapchat. Didn't that go away?
No, that's still around. Unfortunately, my kids are on it all the time. And they try to teach me how to use it. I'm like, I don't get it. Like I helped companies invent digital marketing in the 90s, and I can't figure out Snapchat. But that's my problem, not the listeners. So start there. Start uncorkingastory.com, Instagram, all socials. I'm at Uncorking a Story. Pretty easy to find. And if you're interested in market research, vertigopartners.com is the place to go.
Yeah, we'll have to get you back on so we can take a deeper dive into that. I know that your focus primarily is on this podcast and how to figure out how to expand that rather than do more time trade for dollars. Let's figure out how to make some passive income for you. So thanks for sharing your message on the show, and I know my community is going to get a lot from it. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Doug.
Hey, Nice Guy community, never underestimate the power of nice or the power of a really strong story. Special thanks to our guest, Mike Carlon. All of his information, including access to his website and his podcast and his business, will be right there in the show notes. Steve O'Brien, go ahead and take us out of here.
For the Nice Guys on Business, I'm Steve O'Brien. And may the force be with them. They need all the help they can get.